Hopefully you guys have come here because you're curious about how to grow with no code. If not, I hope by the end of this that I can somehow convince you that it is really cool. So today we're going to go through a few different things: the introduction to no code, understanding what is possible, and what are the things that you could probably do even this afternoon, ideally, and also building your own no code tech stack for growth. And we'll try to leave some room at the end for some Q&A. And if you have any specific questions about maybe some of the problems that you're solving, I'll have my email at the end, and I would be more than happy to answer you. So, hi, my name is Emily, and I head growth at Voiceflow, and I'm also the co-founder of GrowthTO. And as Sarah kindly mentioned, I have been in growth for a little while, and it's safe to say that I really like it. But over the course of being in growth in these different positions, different targets, different challenges, I've really realized while I like growth, I really hate excuses. And what I mean by that is we're dealt with those all the time when we come up with new ideas. Whether it's, we don't have any dev resources to build that, aka everyone needs dev resources, duh, and it's gonna be a while. Or this looks like a lot of work, is it worth it? So trying to figure out, I'm not necessarily sold, so getting buy-in from people at work. Or, sorry, we just don't have budget for this right now. And I hear this all the time, but it's a series A, B, C, D, whatever thing. Or can't you just do more with less, which is really what they're asking. And the truth about growth is that sometimes it's a hard and thankless job. But the beautiful thing about it is that with the right type of motivation, it's challenging, it's rewarding, it's exciting, and crucial for the success of the company that you're at. Or it's also really, really great to just challenge what you want to do professionally. At least that's what I found. And for today, I really want to focus not necessarily on the hardships that everyone's going through or the lack of resources, and I'm sure we can have a vent group at some point. But I really want to focus on what you can do when you don't have resources and how you can succeed. Because the beautiful thing about no code is that it really helps to change the conversation, where you start to hear more people saying statements like, I can build that. I don't need resources to start experimenting. I just need that idea. Or when no code and no resources, all of a sudden becomes, well, no problem. And that's the ideal. So without further ado, let's get into growth with no code. So what the heck is no code? And where on earth does it fit in with this growth funnel that we're so used to hearing about? And kind of getting through that, the first things that you really got to hold on to about no code is that just because it's a no code tool doesn't mean that, let's say if you have a little bit of technical prowess, it's not for you. And it definitely does not mean that we're hating on coders, because holy crap, are they important. And if I could go back to university and learn coding, I totally would. But what it's really more about is about getting past the point of ideation. It's about expediting the work that you want to do, democratizing building so that anybody, no matter how technical they are, can create those live projects, products, experiments, and expedite proof of concept. And it's really built to empower any creator to build more with less or no code. And as a growth marketer, it's going to help you realize your vision faster, to break free from dev dependencies and backlogs, and ultimately even empower you and your team to build, not only within products or with experiments that you're kind of running, but also empathy between technical and non-technical teams. Because there's a lot of times where, especially as you get deeper into larger companies, you're going to need to be able to get better at how you negotiate for resources, how you pitch, how you scope the projects that you need, and getting a better understanding of the logical inputs of what's required to create something will help you become better at communicating that. And it'll also help you automate everything else that keeps you busy day to day. Magical, I know, right? And so kind of getting started with no code, that's really the first step. And the thing about no code is that over the last few years especially, it's gotten so damn good that it's almost impossible to check whether or not something was built custom or whether or not it was built using a series of custom tools. I know if anyone has seen the Growclass revamp on the website, like that is a prime example of a really awesome Webflow project and a really talented designer. And there's a lot of even other great examples that might be a little bit harder to realize at the beginning. But you might recognize a few of these common names. So you got Zapier, Squarespace, Shopify, Typeform. These are all really awesome and really powerful tools that will help you accomplish a ton in your day-to-day. Zapier, whether it's pushing data, automating different notifications, communications, or even getting status reports. Squarespace for building up quick little landing pages, proof of concepts, or even side projects like we've seen a million since quarantine. And Shopify, Canada's darling right now, being able to let people, no matter where they are, build a business from virtually nothing. And even Typeform, trying to figure out how can you improve, how can you get better, how can you build lead forms without having to invest that technical element into it. But there are so many more than just those four. And here are just like some that I like put onto a page before I got tired of literally Googling and importing all of these images. And there are so many of them, whether it is you trying to create a website for the first time, empower your team to do more landing page experimentations, get familiarized with APIs when you have no idea what API even stands for, to even build internal databases, tools, or improve workflows internally and externally. And the best part about this is that not only is there virtually a tool for pretty much any problem that you come across, but there's pretty much a tool for every level of technical ability or every level of user that is familiar with no code. And there's also a really powerful thing that happens when you start to even combine these together. And that's what's really exciting about it. I view no code as almost like adult Lego when you really think about it, where you're building brand new things to kind of get through what are your challenges at the time or what part of funnel is really important to you. So hopefully now we're getting a little somewhere with no code. So let me break it down in a little bit more of like a project-oriented way. So what's the deal? Like we mentioned, no code isn't always obvious, and it's become way more accessible over the last few years. So it doesn't necessarily look like someone doing wizardry on their computer anymore or fake typing something that looks like code. It's starting to take on totally different realms. So you have examples like Notion, which is a very accessible, widely popularized tool that ultimately, when you break it down, is people building their own custom databases and their own custom wikis using blocks that they've created. And I don't know about you, but like this is an example of class notes. My class notes did not look like this. They were pieces of paper. So being able to better organize or better understand logical flows using tools like this is one way of getting started. And I even saw this yesterday, which I gleefully stole from Twitter, of Twitter that even, not Twitter, a user that happens to be a Growclass current participant who built a database on a database and a Notion dashboard for how they're going to go through Growclass. And that looks entirely different from how I use that to communicate with my team. And you even see other earlier examples of that where people have even started to leverage or have more more commonly used landing pages or let's say lead gen forms as their website at the beginning to launch faster, to generate more buzz, to generate an early launch list. And this is an example of Robinhood, but there are so many more tools that have done that. And this is also really great, especially if you're trying to use this for proof of concept before you invest money into something, whether it's an experiment or an entirely new product. And there's also way simpler versions of this to get started. So here's some common problems that I hear all the time when I talk to people. You got a ton of meetings, but you're really awkwardly tired of that back and forth email. Are you free at this like period or not? Like use something like Calendly. Connects directly into your calendar. Let someone book something and reference their own calendar, and it's automatically there. Not sure why your customers are churning, but also don't have the time to manually email or check in on everyone. Why not create an automated campaign for that? When someone's a detractor, send them a follow-up, or when you see that they haven't used the product in a while, send them an email, and you'll be surprised at the feedback that you'll get. And this will drastically help with retention. And then same thing with promoters. What do you do with people who really love your product? Why not automate a flow to help you generate more reviews, or to even invite them to a community, to get a referral out of them so you can multiply more of the good vibes that you're getting from your product. And these are all really simple ways that you could start to leverage just smarter automations and smarter triggers that when it's not possible to multiply your team or your time, you can still multiply the campaigns that you're running. And the beautiful thing as well is that you don't necessarily need to have experience or the need immediately at work. And you can always try with your own thing. So I always recommend with people who are even getting started with growth and they've never grown a product from scratch before, open up a Shopify store, like use that trial, create a dropship store, and just try to grow it. Like you want to learn ads, drive it to something that you built. Or you want to learn copy, send that out and start to send out cold emails yourself for random things. But keep it in the frame that you need. But start to play around with other ways that you can build up your experimentation. Because no code doesn't just help with ideation. It also helps with how you manage and how you communicate the projects that you're working on. So like, here's an example of a few things that we use internally at Voiceflow to kind of keep up the management and keep up with the people that are talking about it. So here's a really easy out of the box Zap that we use with Zapier and Twitter, where we have that connected. So every time someone mentions Voiceflow, it goes into our Slack where we spend 90% of our workday. And it allows myself or our CEO to immediately follow up with them. And this is great for brand retention. It's great for awareness. And it's also really motivating for our team as we're totally decentralized right now. It's great to hear the positives or even jump on the negatives so you can correct them. And same situations with how we're getting smarter with our campaigns and our emails. You don't necessarily need code to have a professionalized looking, let's say, email template or brand or dynamic content going out. This is obviously fake code, so like, do not even bother reading that. But nowadays, what used to take code, PRs, or even an automatic list function. So even if you're one of those marketers who are sitting on a giant list of people and you don't know what to do with, now you can. And you can go retroactively, and all of a sudden these campaigns look less like code and they look a lot more like these flows. And this is an example of an email that goes out when someone hits a page, or it adds them to a segment, it updates fields, it changes a lead score. These are all things that happen with no code. And the beautiful thing about a lot of these tools as well is the visual elements are not only good for learning, but also for sharing the workflows amongst your team, especially since we can't all be in the same room right now. And is also really, really great for when you onboard new employees or new people onto the team so that they can get jump-started a lot faster or copy components for later campaigns. And it's not just limited to campaigns. Like, here's an example of an entire business that's run on a combination of MemberStack, Stripe, Webflow. And this is definitely a resource I'd recommend checking out. It's called MakerPad, and it literally gives you no-code tutorials on to build virtually anything. And obviously was built with no-code tools. And even other tools like this one, if you are one of the people who like love those illustrations that you cannot do yourself, but like desperately want because they're in right now, there are great tools like this one, which is called Open Doodles. There's another one called Humans as well, which is an open source no-code project built as a side project by a designer at Envision. And all of these are totally free to use. And this is built almost entirely on Webflow. And here's an example as well of, this is our in-house webinar and events app that I built. And I, like you, was really tired of seeing all the Zoom pages and that everyone is sending out. They're not pretty. And wanted something that looked a little bit closer to our brand. So built this with Webflow, Airtable, Zoom, and AddThis. And it functions the exact same way, but gives me more control over where our data is going, what I can do with it. And it also auto-generates the emails that we follow up with. So I never have to create any of these. Yeah, so there's so many different ways that, as I mentioned, you can start to not only familiarize with just one part of the tech stack, but now start to see how powerful they get when you combine them together. And if anyone's reading what's on my screen right now, this is obviously, again, fake data. But if you want data from songs in the 90s, this is a great Airtable. All right, other things to know. No code is really starting to pick up, where in the past, a lot of people were extremely impressed by, okay, how did you build that? And nowadays, people are really more impressed about what the experience is. It's really more, does this thing work? Does it provide value? Is it achieving the impact that you're looking for? And here's an example of a maker who created a side project that he actually ended up selling. And it doesn't have a line of code. It was built using Card, Zapier, Airtable, and Sheets, which are all things that are either free or entirely accessible to probably everyone on this call right now. And the beautiful thing about it was that just because it wasn't built with traditional code, it still was immensely valuable. It still generated a ton of leads. It got a bunch of hits, was deeply helpful because he built a resource list. These are all things that you need to reframe as a growth marketer or someone who has less resources and really capitalize on now. And that kind of brings me into the last kind of summary point around this, which is getting started really starts by knowing where to begin. Unlike in more traditional elements where you can go back to Stack Overflow, or you can go to Udemy and maybe learn code from scratch, or learn how to copy popular marketing campaigns or growth tactics. With no code, it's a little bit more of like your choose your own adventure story, where there are so many different tools that are out there that you need to piece together what are the elements that are going to do you justice, that are going to fit in within the problems that you have. I personally always start with inspo because you got to steal before you can create. And here are some examples of some great tools that I would highly recommend. And there's obviously way more examples of different versions or different types of tools that are here, but I don't want to crowd another page with a bunch of logos. And the beautiful thing about that is you don't even have to listen to just me. Here's an example of, this is a tweet that I had asking for alternatives to MailChimp. And as you can see, everybody has their tool of trade. Everybody has an example, and this is a really awesome way of learning more about what's out there. This was genuine. This was not planned for Growclass, but worked out very well with this. And there's also a ton of different ways that I've learned over the years to even swap out or use similar tools for different reasons. So here's the tech stack that we use for growth at Voiceflow very regularly. So as you can see, I really like data and automation. So I like to play in that space a lot. But what do you do with that data? How do you visualize it? And that is really where I lean on Webflow, Typeform. I happen to have a little bit of a design background, so I lean on Sketch a little bit. But if you don't, Canva, awesome. And same with all our email automation. We don't have an in-house email marketer. My team is not that big. So we rely very heavily on our automated email systems to be able to do and keep up with a lot of people. And whenever I need more assets, more content, there's more ways that we can build that or take that from resources as well. So I'm happy to get into deeper conversations around this. If you guys have that, definitely shoot me a message. I'd be happy to chat. And the thing as well that I want to get into is that my road to no code started like well before I knew what no code was. I'm digging out stuff from the grave when myself, Sarah, and Bella used to work together. Here's an example of a campaign that we run entirely with no code. And it started with literally a side conversation that we had at lunch about people don't understand what Tilt was outside of raising money for keggers. It is literally so much more powerful than that. How can we explain to people all of the hardships that Tilt helps with without just telling them collect money for your bills using Tilt? And then we created davistheworst.com, which allowed people to very easily understand what are the elements of Tilt. Publicly shamed Dave, which linked to sharing this campaign, explained examples of why Tilt would be useful with different CTAs that we weren't normally able to use because it was a totally microsite separate from Tilt, which is fun, and still let us do our job and communicate what it is that we needed to do. And all of this was built using Squarespace and Sketch in like a few hours of my time, and then a lot of panic when it accidentally went viral, which was cool. And same situation with other things. So this is like an example of community engagement. where we wanted to engage our massive ambassador program, of which we automated a ton of as well, by the way. And we did a huge campaign, actually more than annually, to outline and to continue to really highlight the work that our ambassadors were doing. We did this using Google Forms and Yesware, which like I would not recommend this pairing, but you can. I would definitely recommend maybe something like this now that I've no code matured. But same situation, huge impact. Very little of our time did not require the resources that typically would be required for that. And we were even able to flip that with other things. So we ran a huge charity campaign where we collected money and also leveraged Tilt in a total microsite for a company called Mealshare, which provides meals for children in need. And we, as I mentioned, totally took a project that got absolutely crazy due to Sarah's crazy growth mind, which is our ambassador program, realized that it outgrew the potential of our tiny team of like 5 people managing like 10,000 university people, and tossed it into a portal where we automated the entire thing, taught them about Tilt, created a separate onboarding, a marketplace that also ran off their actions in Tilt, and we did it predominantly using these 3 things. And like, that's the beauty of it, is that you can put these tools in virtually anyone's hands, but you're going to get different things every time. And it's not just for these crazy big ideas. It's also to keep you in check. Like, this is arguably one of my favorite channels. And it does nothing other than tell me about people who are in onboarding. And those types of things also really help with trying to motivate your team, see where you're at, continue to just bring in simple automations to make it easier to stay top of mind. Because I personally find one of the hardest things about growth is reminding yourself to follow up on things because your mind's running a mile a minute. And there are obviously more parts of this funnel, but this slide got awkwardly small as I put more things in here. So I'm going to stop it here. But there are so many ways that you can start to plug and play the tools that I mentioned in here, or even some quick Google searches to see how you can not only, let's say when looking at your funnel, choose what campaigns that you can do, but also start to slot in where are the elements in between your existing campaigns that maybe take up too much of your time. So let's say if checking Google Analytics is like not your favorite thing on the planet to do. I know, like, I'm in that camp. I would much rather ask Slack how I'm doing and get that report sent to me, or automate an email report sent to me right before I need to do my all hands slides every week. Or other examples, even with, let's say, acquisition. Maybe there's a different version of lead generation that I want to do outside of like download my 800th white paper or webinar. Maybe I want to make a tool for somebody, like an email signature generator for lawyers that don't know how to do that. I can do that using, let's say, Bubble or a marketplace builder. And same thing with activation. So automate those follow-ups with people. You don't need to be that person, but you can reply in person to their replies, which still allows you to have that personal relationship with them. You can change user onboarding to make it more functional using plugins or creating a different email flow, or even on the retention side, leverage more ways that you can get information from those users, especially in the early days, because that is so important. If you're not talking to your customers and if you're not getting data that is not just a number on a dashboard, you're not doing enough. And there's better ways of being able to manage that without really taking on as much work as you think. And so that kind of brings me into the finale of all of this. And this is my butchered version of the Picasso artist stealing quote. Good coders borrow. They go to Stack Overflow, I'm telling you, and they take stuff because they forget. No coders can do that, but we can also steal, which is so cool sometimes when you need to do stuff quickly. And what I mean by that is there's virtually a template or tutorial for pretty much any of these experiments in the early stages. You can take components, you can see how other people are building, because the one thing that's really awesome about no code, and it definitely is also true in coding, but there's so many communities that are willing to share. And getting involved in those conversations are not only going to level you up as a growth marketer or someone in growth, but also just career-wise in how you think. And so if you're just getting started, here's like a laundry list of learning things that I would challenge you to do. Like 1, automate a Slack message using Google Sheets and Zapier. Zapier is free to sign up with, and Google Sheets you probably have. Try it. See how it works. See if there's ways that you can automate parts of your flow right now with that. 2, you want to be one of those people who can beautifully design a professional email landing page website. Try Be Free Pro or Webflow and export it to HTML if you're feeling spicy and you want to impress someone. And same situation with, let's say you're at a stage of the company or you're running a campaign that doesn't necessarily warrant or that you can afford a CRM like HubSpot or Salesforce or anything else that's kind of on that market. See if you can build a CRM using Airtable and see if you can keep yourself accountable that way. And if you want more recommendations, like feel free to go to my horribly outdated personal website and go to Growclass. And I would be happy to send you this email, of which I will also tell you at the end how I built, because it's also with no code. And it links to a bunch of different ways that you can get started or different tools. And lastly, in summary, no code will empower you and your team to create live prototypes or experiences to test and grow faster. Number 2, just because it's no code doesn't mean it's not going to provide the same impact or help you get resources in the future. Because don't get me wrong, this is not about like an us versus them thing. It's about like, hey, I got priorities, you got priorities, all of us got things we got to get done. So let's all get things done faster and let's come together when they work. And 3rd, whether you're new or leveling up, there's no shortage of inspiration or tutorials available to build something today. And all of us are locked up right now, so like definitely now's the time. So the future of growth is going to look really different in the next few quarters, and we're already feeling that now. And it's going to be unlocked by doing a lot more with less, because the truth is that now that statement is really true. And beyond that, it's going to be about getting from that ideation stage to experimentation easier, faster, and in a better way to communicate across your team. And it's going to be about empowering people to stay creative and stay fresh, because the same old tactics that we used to do out of the box that are maybe even in blog posts that we've referenced for years might not work nowadays. And no code is just there to help you get there faster. So without further ado, stay in touch, and I can't wait to see what you build. Feel free to shoot me a message if you have any other questions.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Thanks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Amazing. Let's get to some questions. Please, if you have questions, toss them in the Q&A. I'm going to be grabbing them. Morgan's asking if we can share the website again. We can put that in the chat. I think it's just emilylonetto.com/growclass.
Yes. I should have kept that up longer.
I'm putting it in the chat. It's all good. Okay, couple of quick questions to get started. So Daniela asks, what type of resources do you use to stay up to date on new no-code automation tools?
Yeah, I use a bunch of different resources. I think Product Hunt is awesome. A quick search in no code, you can like also backlog so many that have been launched. MakerPad has a really good newsletter that releases a bunch of even tutorials that are there. And also like follow no code on Twitter. People share the craziest things that they've built. The amount of times that I've even direct DM'd people because they built something that like I have no comprehension on how they completed that. And they're like willing to share how they got there.
Oh, that's awesome. That is very cool. I know Product Hunt is one of my favorite places to hang out on the internet. How do you manage user lists without asking your users what content they want to receive?
There's definitely a bunch of different ways. So obviously you're always going to have like your core user list, which are going to be the people that sign up for your product or directly sign up for something. So I kind of have a couple different ways that I do that. One is more direct. So I label my forms, like if it's my newsletter sign up versus my lead gen or enterprise sign up, et cetera. And the other way that I would recommend is you can also use like page domains, or you can use UTMs. So I also do auto segmentation based on where that person hangs out on my website or where they came from when they signed up. So that also kind of helps to inform. Or if you want to be a little bit more strategic about it, mailing preference list, gotta do it. Or you can always ask. That's kind of the beautiful thing as well, is just because you didn't set it up in the first place doesn't mean that you can't correct that later.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. When in doubt, ask people what they want, or else you're going to give them something they don't want, and that's not helpful. Miriam's asking, with so many tools out there to learn and or pay for, is there anything more end-to-end that can replace a couple of the tools that you listed?
I think that it really, really depends on like what you're trying to achieve. All of those tools, and why I tried to mention so many is because I think that people fall into this bracket of they think that there's like one tool, when really it's really more about like the connections that you make with them. I think that if you're getting started with no code, start with like a Zapier or an Integromat if you want to get like even fancier, because they're going to help you learn like the logic of how they're all connected and how automation works, and will probably work with stuff that you already have. You could probably do a ton of connections without adding too much to your stack right now.
Amazing. What are some examples of what you can do with autopilot?
Oh my gosh, love autopilot. There's so many things. Like I've done everything from your basic like email campaigns and follow-ups to I generate like literally my campaign for all of our events is like 2 pieces on autopilot for every single event ever, and it's just dynamic. So like you can do dynamic campaigns, you can do automatic RSS feeds. So like you're updating something on your blog or a new event and you want to send a weekly digest, but don't have someone that wants to write that every week, you can do that. You can also do like operational flows, which I find are really helpful. So if someone is doing certain actions that you really like visits the pricing page 5 times, you can like change the field to be like, reach out to this person. And that will trigger other things. Or you can build lead scoring, tons of different stuff that you can go in there, but would definitely recommend checking it out. There's so many things you can build.
Amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to try to get through as many of these as possible. There's some really good questions in here. So Janice is saying, I'm wondering what's the best way to create a functional MVP that relies on third-party APIs? Also, is there a community for no code that you recommend joining?
Oh, I'm in like a million communities because I'm just like a community nerd. I think Sarah knows that. Yeah, I would definitely recommend, I get a lot actually personally out of like the Webflow community. It's not like no code specifically, but there are a lot of no code people in there. And I find a lot of the conversation is around that. I would also recommend like following MakerPad or like Ben Tossell. He is awesome and just like tends to grab a lot of no code minds in one spot. It's a lot of learning there. It's Tossell with EL at the end, or ELL, I believe. Just saw that on the chat. And other things as well is, I would definitely say, as to your like API question, like Standard Library is a really awesome resource. They literally make APIs like autocomplete. So you like low key look like you're coding, but you're not, and it's really cool. And there's also like Zapier is actually a really great tool when it comes to getting like very simple versions of APIs. And if it's an app, connect it with like things like Bubble or any form of front-facing applications.
Amazing. So Emerlyn, who you showed her wonderful Notion Growclass design, says, I tend to get really excited about new tools as an early adopter, but this can lead to juggling too many new apps and tools. How do you go about keeping track of the new and shiny things while also knowing what you'll commit to?
So I think like any product adoption is like, it's a little bit on you, but it's also a lot on them, right? So yeah. If you don't receive value out of using a tool within the first, like, I don't know, 30 days or whatever it is, like that's one way of kind of weeding it out. I think like I'm with you on that. I love shiny objects. I will jump at anything. But I think another thing to note is like, also, instead of just jumping on things because you can, try to strategically jump on ones that are there to solve a problem that you already have. And I think like I come across this a lot with people where they're jumping on something because they just think it's a good idea, but it's not a problem that's really meaningful to them right now. So you don't have that initial drive to like really push you over to the point of realizing value. And like lastly as well, like swap out the tools that you use. Like if you find something that you like better, it's okay. I've definitely changed my loyalties, particularly like Adobe to Sketch as an example, over the years, and that's okay. It's like part of leveling up what your stack is.
Awesome. So we have an anonymous question. A lot of no-code tools require snippets of code to be added to every page where they'll be used. We run in a custom application that's fully controlled by engineering. So no code isn't fully without code for me, thumbs down. Questions. How can I gain alignment from the engineering team when they get defensive about no code solutions? And what are your recommendations for event tracking tools so I don't have to request new events to be set up every time on the custom website?
Sure. So there's a couple different ways. So I agree there are a lot of no-code tools that do require, let's say, like a JavaScript snippet to just be uploaded in like your head. And while some of them like that's something you just have to get through. I often, when I'm fighting for those things, number one, like they very rarely make any like actual change visibly to anything on the site. So like you should be able to get over that buffer. The second one is always try to communicate like the why of what that tool is trying to accomplish. Like if that's going to save a ton of time from you begging the DevOps team for reports, or if it's going to save a ton of time for setting up automations on like your blog or on landing pages, like that tends to become more of a reason to prioritize it. The other way is like align deeply with product on it. Like going directly to an engineer is good if you have like great rapport with them and they happen to be like the one person that you need on your side to do it. But the truth is that aligning with product and getting that is also a really easy way or easier way of getting that done. And in terms of event tracking, I think that there's a range of that. So I personally use Segment and Amplitude and Mixpanel mostly, but that does require like you getting aligned with product, does require you understanding how to name or get new events in there. So would recommend taking a look at some more out-of-box solutions. So like Barometrics is really good if you're looking at like retention and like revenue tracking. If you're looking at like maybe like doing a course on GA, so getting more out of Google Analytics so you can put those things in, because I guarantee you that's already authenticated on your site. Or using things like Hotjar, or more visual style tools, or even just putting in more out-of-box stuff, so like more for user onboarding, that will allow you to have more of an insight on drop-off.
Awesome. And very much agreed on all of the tools that you just listed. Roberta asks, so with so many tools, how do you connect everything on the back end so you don't have scattered information kind of here and there?
Yeah, so that's kind of why I like, so I kind of like think about no code or just tools in general as like your central nervous system apps, and then like your visualizers or like your makeup, if you will. And there's definitely things in between, so don't get me wrong on that. But I think that like I use Segment and like Zapier, for instance, as like I consider them like central nervous system tools, where it is really easy for someone to go in and see a bunch of different automations and different ways that data is interacting or getting pushed places in one spot. I try to keep it pretty simple in terms of like how many database tools that I use. So if it's like visualization, I stick to like Mixpanel or Amplitude. If it is like I'm running an experiment and it's like customer experimentation data, probably always going to be Airtable, so that everything's all within one base. And I think as well, it's really about sharing and making sure that you're pretty meticulous on like how do you document these experiments. We hold a really high standard to PMs and engineers and people who work in Confluence all the time, but we need to do the same on our side to show that experimentation documentation as well.
I'm such a big nerd for experimentation documentation after having to search through a whole bunch of random bad non-documentation in the past. So Mila asks, what are the best places to learn how to use new tools? Are they on their respective websites, or do you find YouTube helpful? Where are the spots that you go to learn?
I like definitely say like YouTube is your source for like a crazy amount of things. Like I love YouTube. I love live streams and builds. Like rebuilds I find are actually the most useful things for me. I like almost entirely learned how to use Webflow by watching a guy named Pixel Geek rebuild popular websites using Webflow. And like I think that those are really awesome places. And I think as well, and why I have that laundry list there is like really starting with like those small projects and just like getting to this point of like, oh yeah, complete. Like I did that. Like a lot of it's also confidence and just understanding like the logic that's required. So a lot of it's practice. So I definitely recommend like YouTube's a great source. There's a lot of templates and showcases that are offered on specific sites. So like use those, see how people have built stuff. And then lastly, try to build stuff and copy stuff on your own.
Yeah, amazing. And do you have any recommendations for referral programs? I feel like I know what you're gonna say.
Oh my God. Okay, I think it's to my point about like changing my mind and like loyalty on this. I think this is the topic that I've like changed my mind on the absolute most. I have gone everywhere from like, if you need something really like light and it's really just more like a hustle.co style referral programs, just like getting more like readership and rewarding with milestones. I think like Viral Loops is like a really easy one. It's relatively affordable. It's pretty cheap and plug and play. It has its quirks. Sarah can probably talk to it. But it works. And I think as you get like deeper into it, if you want like more formal referral systems and link tracking, you can either build, you can start to build even with like custom trackable links. I know like that's something that we've done, but if you want something more plug and play, you can do maybe like some work with like Bitly, trying not to recommend too many things on the referral side so this doesn't become like widely affiliate focused. But I think that there's a ton of different ways that you can do that. The easiest way, like do a referral form or add a section in your sign up that just like, how did you hear about us? And you can do connections or VLOOKUPs to see that person in your database. There's a ton of different stuff that you can do.
Awesome. I've got two more questions if that's okay.
Yeah.
So one from Christina, can you talk a little bit more about RSS feeds and automating a blog or weekly digest?
Yeah, this one was actually, I think like if anybody runs a blog as like a like 10% part of their job that like requires like 80% of their brain power sometimes. I would definitely say like using an RSS feed and having that dynamically update an email. I found a really awesome like out of the box like template for that using Integromat. Literally if you Google search like RSS feed blog and like Integromat will probably come up. I think it was like in their onboarding. But basically what that does is it tracks so that every single time that we publish something new onto the site, it pulls certain elements that are from that are published and will put that into a neatly pre-formatted email. So it's basically the email itself looks empty. It just has like variables in it. But when it's sent out, it's pulling dynamically from what we updated.
Amazing. And last question, which I find hilarious, is the Dave is the Worst site still live?
I wish it was still live.
It's still live too. That was such a good site.
It like lives virtually on my personal site, and I think that's like the last spot on the internet that it lives right now. But it was definitely connected to, I want to say like either Kent's credit card or like
I think it was
someone from Tilt, and it definitely got canceled.
It might have actually moved my credit card.
Maybe. I mean, like that's about how scrappy some of these projects get.
Yeah. Yes, they did. Well, we're a couple minutes over, so I just want to give everyone their day back. But thank you so much for joining us. Emily, we've recorded this session, so we'll be putting it up on the Growclass blog with some of Emily's resources and a little bit more of a deep dive. So thank you so much for everyone for joining. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us, Emily.
No problem.
Always.